Time operates differently in the mountains. It layers, like sediment. Stories become geology, and woven through the bedrock of Appalachian oral tradition is a singular, chilling thread. The belief that the moment of death is often preceded by a signaler crack in the ordinary world, through which the inevitable briefly shines. These are not the violent ghosts of the wronged, seeking vengeance. They are something arguably more ancient and messengers, harbingers, omens. Their appearances are recorded not as the climax of a story, but as its prologue, a white animal where none should be. A sound with no source, a presence felt but not seen. To witness one was to read your name in a ledger kept by unseen hands. This compilation is an archival deep dive into 6 of the most persistent and well-documented omens from the region. We will explore each case, not as an isolated scare, but as a cultural artifact, examining the historical setting, the first-hand accounts where they exist, and the profound psychological and societal impact these events left in their wake. Our journey begins not with a ghost, but with a gate left open. 1. The gate. The angel. The gate, and the broken boundary the house on Bunner's Ridge was a testament to young love. Built by a man named Bert for his bride, their idyll was shattered in their second year when Bert was felled by a violent, wasting fever. The illness was so severe, his prognosis so grim, that his neighbors performed a somber, pragmatic act of community. They dug his grave in the small family cemetery directly across the narrow, winding road. But Bert defied expectations. He lingered in a twilight state, neither improving nor succumbing. It was during this agonizing suspension that the phenomenon began. A visitor, departing the hushed sick room one evening, heard a distinct, dry percussion from the cemetery, a shika shika shika, like pebbles in a gourd, or perhaps beads on a stone floor. The sound evoked not wildlife, but ritual. Bert's wife, already stretched thin by vigil, was plunged into a new dimension of fear. She sought out a local practitioner of folk medicine, a man versed in the old ways. His diagnosis was swift and terrifying. The sound was the angel of death. It had been summoned by the prepared grave and would not be placated until that grave was filled. Acting on his instruction, she had the grave filled back in. The rattling did not cease. The folk doctor then performed a counter-ritual. He mixed a powder of ground blue flag root and consecrated salt, sprinkling it along the entire perimeter of the cemetery fence. This, he explained, would create a spiritual boundary containing the angel within hallowed ground after dark. His final warning was emphatic. The gate to the field must stay shut, especially at night. Do not give it a path. 4 nights thereafter, the woman's world contracted to 2 sounds. Her husband's ragged breath, and the relent Pasin shika 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 from across the road. A sonic prison just beyond the window. The psychological torture eroded her strength. Deciding the mountain air was poison, she arranged to move Bert to the hospital in Morgantown. The next day, an ambulance arrived. As it was a long vehicle, the driver found the road too narrow to turn. He did the only practical thing. He opened the gate to the cemetery field and used the open ground to maneuver his vehicle around. That night, exhausted and hopeful, the woman went to bed early. The silence was a blessing until, deep in the witching hour, it was broken. The familiar rattling began, but it moved with a new urgency. She heard it reach the fence line, and then horrifyingly continued through it. This was followed by the unmistakable, rusty shriek of the cemetery gate swinging open on its hinges. The rattling then hastened down the Packard road, fading steadily in the exact direction of Morgantown. She spent the remaining darkness until dawn, seated on her porch, weeping silently at the open gate. When the hospital's hearse arrived the next morning, the driver needed no words. "He's dead," she stated, her voice hollow. The driver later noted in his report that his hearse was shorter. He hadn't needed to open the gate to turn. The ambulance driver, in his innocent practicality, had breached the ritual boundary. The omen, once contained, had been given a physical route to follow its destined charge. proving that the laws governing these messengers could be as specific and fragile as a line of dust on a fence. 2. Shiny eyes. The photonic ghost of the Ligonier mine disaster. The anthracite mines of western Pennsylvania in the early 1900s were cathedrals of darkness, where men worked by the dim light of headlamps, their world defined by the groan of timber and the constant threat of the bump, the mountain settling. Superstition was a survival tool, but in 1913, at Colonel Thomas Essemini, in Ligonier, superstition took on a tangible, terrifying form. Miners began reporting a creature. It emerged from a supposed lair in the mountain at irregular intervals. Descriptions were consistent, the size of a large bear, with a hide the color of wet slate. But it was the eyes that defined it. They were two perfect circles, emitting a steady, actinic, blue-white light as bright as the headlamp of a fast-approaching train. Thing named it, with grim simplicity, Shiny Eyes. Its behavior was ritualistic. It would walk with a slow, deliberate pace to the mouth of the main slope, peer into the darkness for several minutes, and then return the way it came. Its appearances were not casual. The miners soon charted a horrific correlation. Within 15 minutes of a Shiny Eyes visitation, a section of roof would collapse. The death toll was always 2 or 3 men. Colonel Thomas, facing a collapse of morale, took drastic action. He hired 2 brothers, Bill and Jack Robinson, infamous for their fearlessness and brutality. The deal was stark. $300 cash each, a small fortune, a day's wage, a jug of whiskey, and 2 Hyper-Red Winchester rifles. Their sole task: kill the creature. They set up in a tool shack along its path. As night fell, they drank the whiskey to steady their nerves. Jag, emboldened by a drink, left to fetch another jug from town, leaving Bill on watch. Bill, succumbing to the alcohol and the eerie silence, dozed off. He was awakened not by a sound, but by a change in light. The shack's interior was flooded with a harsh, shadowless brilliance. In the open doorway stood Shiny Eyes. The light from its eyes was physical, a pressure on the skin. The creature turned its head, the twin beams sweeping over Billis. Frozen form, it showed no aggression, only a cold, appraising disinterest. Then it turned and continued its solemn walk toward the mine. A terrified Bill was revived by the returning Jack. Armed and angry, they waited for its return. They saw it complete its ritual. As it started back up the trail, they opened fire from 30 yards. The reports of the rifles were deafening. They saw sparks where bullets struck rock near the creature. But Shiny Eyes did not startle, stumble, or alter its pace. It simply stopped, turned its head, and directed its blinding gaze toward the shooters. The light seemed to intensify, not weed hit, but with a profound, dismissive intelligence. Then it turned and was absorbed into the rock face. 1 hour later, the mine exploded. Not a collapse, but a catastrophic gas ignition. Worst disaster in the region's history. "22 men died. In the investigation that followed, a grim consensus formed among the surviving miners. Shiny Eyes had not been a malevolent spirit causing the accidents. It had been a gauge, a living barometer of the mountain's deadly pressure. Its final, most luminous appearance was merely the needle pegging into the red, a warning too vast for anyone to comprehend until it was too late. After the explosion, the creature was never seen again. Its purpose, it seemed, was complete. 3. The White Horse. The omen that closed the woods of Mason, the town of Mason, existed in an uneasy truce with the dense, old-growth forest that surrounded it. The truce had one non-negotiable term. No one entered the woods after sundown. This was not due to wolves or bears, but to a resident ghost, a stallion-sized white horse that glowed with its own inner light. The lore was absolute. To see, it was to die. The death wasn't always immediate. It could be within the hour, the day, or the weak. But it was certain. George Miller was a skeptic of the new, industrial age. A robust man in his 40s, he viewed the tale as backward nonsense. On the 4th of July, 1898, fueled by patriotic spirit and considerable whiskey at the town's gambling hall, he decided to prove his point. As the clock neared to 30 a.m., his friends begged him to take the long road. He laughed, mounted his bay mare, and turned toward the woods. The shortcut was a tunnel of blackness, the canopy blotting out the stars. His horse grew nervous. About halfway through, George saw a light ahead, not the warm yellow of a lantern, but a cool, phosphorescent white, like it grew, resolving into the shape of a horse. But this was no lost pony. It stood a full hand taller than his own, its musculature perfect beneath a coat that shone like polished alabaster. It made no sound, emitted no breath in the cool air. It simply stood on the path, blocking his way, its head turned toward him. George's bravado evaporated, replaced by a primal, gut-churning terror. It was the utter silence that was most wrong. He yanked the reins to turn, but a sudden vice-like pain clenched his chest. It was not a heart attack in the modern sense. It was as if the sight itself had triggered a physical reaction, a spiritual poison. He gasped, clawing at his shirt. The world narrowed to the horse's luminous, indifferent eyes. He slid from the saddle, dead before his body struck the loam. A search party found him at first light. His mare stood grazing nearby, unharmed. There were no other hoofprints in the soft earth. The town's response was final and collective. They did not post signs or pass a law. Instead, the men of Mason gathered with axes and saws. They felled trees across every known path into those woods, creating not a fence, but a symbolic barricade. The area was henceforth referred to as the White Horse Wood, a place officially ceded to the Omen. The community had learned that some warnings are not suggestions, and some territories belong not to the living, but to the agents of transition. 4. The White Stallion. The courteous escort of Barber County. Not all omens are witnessed by the dying. Some are shown to the living as a form of cosmic notification. In a remote Barber County hollow around 1900, the Gold family kept vigil. Old Man Gal, the patriarch, was in his final hours, his breathing the slow tick of a failing clock. The family gathered children, grandchildren, their voices hushed, the atmosphere thick with anticipated grief. Just past midnight, young Henry, tasked with fetching more wood, saw movement on the ridge behind the house. A horse, a stallion of such pure white it seemed to draw the moonlight to itself, topped the rise. It moved with an uncanny, silent dignity. Down the slope toward the homestead, Henry called the others to the window. They watched, a silent audience. As the stallion approached, it did not snort or whinny. It circled the farmhouse once at a slow walk, its head turning as if inspecting the walls, the roof, the chimney from which a thin sickroom smoke still rose. The circuit complete, it paused, facing the front of the house. For a moment, it seemed to nod. Then it turned and trotted back up the hillside, its form growing fainter until it vanished over the ridge like a star extinguished. At that precise moment, the last gleam of white disappeared. A soft, final exhalation came from the bedroom. Old Man Goal had passed. The stallion was never reported in that hollow again. This account stands apart for its lack of terror. The omen was not a threat, but an announcement. It performed its duty with a solemn, almost respectful clarity. It served as a transcendental courtesy call, a signal to the living that the process of collection was underway, allowing them a moment of psychological preparation. In a culture where a good death mattered, the White Stallion provided its framework. 5. White Death. The dog that leaped through the window omens could be intimate, bypassing the role of messenger to become the direct agent. In the spring of 1911, young Esther was recovering from the fever had broken. The poxes were scabbing over, and the doctor confirmed she was on the mend, likely to be out of bed in a day or two. Yet, during her illness, a mournful, howling cry had haunted the perimeter of the farm, each neat a sound her father dismissed as a lonely coyote. Then the dog appeared. For 3 consecutive afternoons, a large, shaggy dog of an indeterminate breed, pure white, sat at the edge of the property. directly in line with Esther's bedroom window. It did not approach the house, bark, or scavenge. It simply sat and stared. The family, though unsettled, shooed it away. It would leave, only to return the next day at the same time. On the fourth day, Esther was propped up in bed, taking broth from her mother. The window was open to admit the mild air. Without a sound, the white dog appeared in the yard. It broke into a run, and with a powerful, fluid leap, cleared the windowsill and landed softly on the braided rug inside the room. Esther's mother froze, the spoon halfway to her daughter's lips. The dog ignored her completely. It walked to the bedside, placed its front paws on the mattress, and leaned forward. It did not growl or whimper. It extended its tongue and gave Esther's pale hand a single, slow, deliberate lick. Then it dropped back to the floor, leaped back out the window, and disappeared into the field. The act was so surreal it suspended disbelief. 5 minutes later, Esther complained of a sudden, bone-deep cold. Her skin grew clammy. Within minutes, she was dead. Her face a mask of serene pallor. The doctor was baffled. There had been no medical indication of a relapse. In this case, the omen transcended symbolism. The white dog was not a harbinger of a separate, impending death. Its physical contact was the fatal event. It transformed from a sign into the very mechanism of passage, a psychopomp in canine form, executing its duty with a terrifying, gentle efficiency. 6. A ride with the devil. The 3-week death warrant. Some omens are not spectral animals, but personalized, predatory intelligences. This account, preserved in a Randolph County family's private chronicle from the 1880s, details a metaphysical assault. The witness, a farmer known for his piety and steadiness, was riding home from the mill on the Mill Creek Road one autumn night. The forest was a wall of ink. Suddenly, behind him, a tremendous crash shattered the silence. Sound of a heavy, rusted log chain dropping from a great height onto stone. Before the echoes faded, a crushing weight landed on the horse's rump behind the saddle. 2 points of agony, sharp as ice picks, drove into the flesh of his shoulders. Assuming a bear attack, he turned, fists clenched. What he saw defied his earthly understanding. Gripping his shoulders were not paws, but long, black, taloned fingers, leathery and cold. He wrenched his head further, meeting the gaze of his passenger. 2 eyes, like smoldering coals in a forge, burned with malevolent intelligence in a face of wrinkled, gray hide. The nose was mere slits, and curving from its temples were 2 distinct, horn-like protrusions. It was the archetype of the adversary, etched onto his reality. A silent, frantic battle ensued. He beat at the arms, he shouted scripture. He spurred his terrified horse into a mad gallop down the dark road. The entity held fast, its claws anchored deep. He could feel its breath, cold and sulphurous, on his neck. The ride was an eternity of panic. Only as the lantern light of his own farmhouse came into view did the weight vanish. The pain in his shoulders remained, bleeding freely. Inside, he made his weeping wife swear secrecy before recounting the tale. His conclusion was not of salvation, but of grim fatalism. "I have just seen the devil," he whispered, "and he won't be long now before he gets me." For the next 3 weeks, he worked under a shadow, a man marked. He repaired his tobacco shed. On the 21st day after the ride, a roof shingle gave way. The fall was less than 10 feet, but he landed on his back across a timber. His final word, called out with his last breath, was a desperate, gasped, "Water." This omen was unique in its personal engagement, an extended timeline. It was not a passive sighting, but an active marking a spiritual claim staked. The 3-week period served as a horrifying gestation, a defined span in which the witness was forced to live with the absolute certainty of his impending end, transforming the omen from a warning into a prolonged execution of the soul before the body followed. Examining these 6 cases collectively reveals a sophisticated taxonomy within Appalachian folk belief. The omen is rarely random. Its form often relates to the victim's environment or manner of passing. The mind's spirit, the woods-dwelling horse, the sickbed stallion, the domestic dog. Psychologically, these stories serve critical functions. For the community, they provide a framework to explain sudden, senseless tragedy, the mine disaster, the young girl's death. They transform chaotic misfortune into a narrative with a foreseen, and thus somehow more orderly, conclusion. For the individual, belief in such omens could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the sheer terror of the sight induces a fatal physiological shock. Are they real? The archives do not record objective truth, but they meticulously record experience. The consistency across decades and counties is striking, whether understood as projections of collective anxiety, coincidences hardened into legend by time, or genuine glimpses of a metaphysical ecology we barely perceive. Their power is undeniable. They endure because they speak to the fundamental human desire to see a pattern in the chaos of mortality. The idea that death might knock before entering is both terrifying and perversely comforting. It suggests a cosmos with rules, even if those rules are written in a language of ghost lights and pale animals. These documented messengers from the threshold remain, challenging us from the pages of the Grimlore archives. They ask us to consider not just what we believe, but what generations before us consistently witnessed and feared. In the end, they are less about the moment of death and more about the profound, unsettling moments just before it to end the world. For a select few, briefly reveals a hidden and irreversible grammar. Share any similar family or local accounts with respect. Subscribe for more deep explorations into the intersection of history, folklore, and the enduring human encounter with the unexplained. Until next time.